where I could then start to do my obviously do research and then try to implement that, build experience, experiment with different approaches, and ultimately all of that would lead to what today is called Project Comms, the program that I use today.
Yeah, and that is what I really wanted to talk about. Your language simplicity project. You have multiple projects because you are an artist. You have multiple projects, like photo project, something about okay, I can't computers. I'm really sorry.
No
Something about
problem, no
computers.
problem. A lot of people, when they see that, they think like, excuse my language, but what the hell is this? So,
No,
yes,
I understand what it is, but I can't express it in another
yes,
language.
yes. So, I suppose in order to explain more about what I do as a creative and as an artist, I think it is important to also understand a lot more about my brain. So, I am diagnosed neurodivergent. My brain operates differently. It sees the world differently to your ordinary person, right? So that is one of the reasons why I wanted to, create my own approach. I was very annoyed by the complexity that a lot of teachers in Moscow were required to engage in, and what clients were provided, and I saw this as an issue that would actually create more obstacles to effective communication. So that is a bit of history as to how I started along that path, if I can say, of my development in that project. But yes, so I am a general creative who has multiple projects. My focus is on deconstructionism, minimalism. So you can maybe just call me a minimalist creative. So what I do is I look at complexity, and my goal is to try and deconstruct it so that I reveal its most foundational, its most central elements. And through that, one can gain more focus, more clarity, more control, and can bring back more control and intent back into their lives, at least for me. And that seems to be inspiring to many others around me, especially in my one project, the language project, which is called Project Comms, also known as the English Simplicity Project. Yes.
Which I'm currently in. Hello.
Which you are currently a client of. So in terms of the computers, that is a digital art project where I try to deconstruct what it means to play a video game. It goes back to the early days of video games, and we live in a world where video games become increasingly hyper realistic, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not against that in itself, but the objective of this is to deconstruct all of that down to its most central element, to understand what does it mean when I actually play a game on a computer. Then
what is the game?
Exactly. And my photography project was very interesting, actually. In 2017, I bought a camera or 2016, I bought a camera in Moscow. And that's the camera that I still use to this day. It is a DSLR, a Canon. And I started to experiment with different photographic styles. And I was even contacted by an art gallery in London that if I wanted to present some of my works at an exhibition that they would hold. They believed that it suited their style that they wanted to curate. So what it was basically, I started with color photos, and then I said, no, I want to go simpler. So then I started to take color photos, but then I would make everything black and white except for a specific pattern within the photo. It would be color. And that was the one that the gallery liked. They said they liked the injection of color into black and white.
So did it work with the London gallery?
Yeah, so that was the one that they were interested in, the style. But then I wanted to go further. So I went further, and then I took black and white photos and then just brought out simple color geometric shapes. And then I wanted to go even further, and I just focused on black and white photos with objects in a very minimalist presentation with geometric shapes. And eventually I went to the absolute deconstruction, which is just what I call blockout photography, where it forms just a solid black rectangle because the exposure on the camera
Mm-hmm.
and the lighting is basically reduced. A cap is essentially placed over the lens,
Mm-hmm.
and it is done very deliberately. It is an exploration of imagination, to revisit the imagination, and to explore the idea of storytelling again, to explore the
Mm-hmm.
idea of experience beyond the lens. A lot of people are lost behind the lens of a camera when they need to experience something that they do not actually experience it. So
Mm-hmm.
these photos, which are essentially just black rectangles, think of Malevich's square. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Malevich.
Malevich,
Malevich.
yeah, yeah. So just think of
Mm-hmm.
Malevich's square,
Mm-hmm.
black
Yeah.
square. This is
Mm-hmm.
very similar to that, but there is a purpose to it. It is, as I said before, to help, or to encourage us to think about the idea of storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
imagination, and the idea of what it is like to experience something without a camera. Just be
Mm-hmm.
there, be present in the moment. And I think in our
Mm-hmm.
modern society where a camera is always in our pocket, that might not be a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
I know. Okay, keeping the same idea of simplicity and clearness and understanding, probably we digressed a little bit with art. Let's go back to language because I'm an English teacher. I'm also your student slash client, and yeah, you teach me language and you explain how to simplify things.
Hmm, hmm,
So, and this is where things get really interesting because first, I was a bit concerned about the word simple because I don't know, probably this is in our Russian culture, but simple is neutral, but people understand this word as, negatively colored. So, what does it really mean? Simplicity project. So you simplify the language and um, well, many people may argue that probably you sound more robotic or unnatural or even stupid. So maybe other people may see you as a stupid person, or maybe somebody who doesn't acquire a cool, advanced, and proficient level of English.
hmm,
So
hmm.
how can you answer to that?
Well, there are many ways to answer that, and I suppose the way to
Mhm,
start is to help, is just to highlight the fact that I'm not against complexity in language.
mhm,
But what I do like to do is to create a clear separation between language as art and language as a practical tool. Language
mhm,
as art is your literature, your poetry, things like that. And it is deliberately made complex very often. It sometimes writers and poets want to not be understood because they want to create the mysticism of love or beauty and things like that, and the
mhm,
to deliberately make it unclear. This is
mhm,
an artistic decision. This is a stylistic, or not just stylistic, but this is a deliberate choice made by the artists. And that is beautiful because art is limitless. And the way in which people can
mhm,
express themselves is limitless. So I respect that 100%. I encourage one to express themselves, and I support that and respect it 100%. But when we talk about language
mhm,
as a practical tool, then
mhm,
complexity starts to become, I start to criticize it more, right?
mhm, mhm,
So, language primarily, if we look at it in terms of its practical value, language is about communication. Communication is about understanding, and
mhm,
understanding usually leads to actionable results. We communicate
mhm,
with each other, for example, to cooperate, to get results from each other.
mhm, mhm,
So your question is, well, what happens if you sound stupid? And I always ask my clients the following question.
mhm.
If you walk into a room and you talk to 10 people and only 3 of the people understand your complex language, who's the real idiot? So you defeat the point of
Yeah.
language communication from a
Mhm, mhm,
practical level. In terms of art, that is different. This is about language as a tool, not about language as art. And this is the
mhm,
difference. So I always try to maintain that separation. And I remember I met one of my old lecturers from university
mhm,
because I studied English at university level. And she was with
mhm,
one of her colleagues at the university who was an American. I did not know him, first time I met him. I shook his hand, and they asked, "What is it that I do now?" I explained my project to them,
Mm-hmm.
in language, that is project comms, and the American said,
Mm-hmm.
"Do you not think that you um, dumb down the language?" And I
Mm-hmm.
explained to him exactly what I explained to you, and he looked and said, "Very good answer. Never thought of it that way." You know?
So it's like uglify, yeah.
Yeah, uglify,
Mm-hmm.
dumbify.
Okay.
You can use any made up slang word you want. Yeah,
Bastardize, maybe.
bastardized. But when I explained it
Mm-hmm.
to him in terms of, look, we're not here to remove it, we are here to
Mm-hmm.
channel it effectively. So when it comes to art and expression, go crazy. Literature, poetry,
Mm-hmm.
go for it. But when it comes to, I need to do business with a multinational team from Japan, Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
and France, yeah, it might actually help to be more practical in the way that you communicate. And the ironic thing is that if a person tries to use complex language with a first language speaker, the first
Mm-hmm.
language speaker will not think, wow, this person is intelligent. They'll think, wow, this person is arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
This person is annoying because now my brain has to process, has to use more energy to
Mm-hmm.
process an idea that one can express in a simpler way. So think of
Mm-hmm.
it that way. It is not just about effectiveness, because a first language speaker can understand. If someone speaks in a complex way to me, I can understand them. But so it is effective, but it is not efficient. And efficiency
Mm-hmm.
means to use fewer resources to get the same result. Why must my brain use more resources to process this person's complex language when it can be
Mm-hmm.
done in a simpler way? And I become
Mm-hmm.
annoyed by that. I really, really do. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's just impolite, to make people go through all this forest, jungle of thoughts of yours to understand the core meaning. Um, you know, um, when we talk about complexity, we sometimes might forget the register, because the register is different. It's not only about scientific papers. Oh, they have their own party. They can do whatever they want. But yeah, we talk about our everyday communication. So we have formal English and informal English. So this is basic. Um, Having something over complex in formal language seems quite ordinary. Yeah, we're used to it. This is formal language. But the problem is, correct me if I'm wrong, we have too much complexity and unnecessary art features in our informal language. All these natural expressions, slang, colloquial phrases, even idioms. Idioms are cool, but I have no idea how we can um, communicate using idioms. This is just impossible. So complexity is not always about formal language or scientific papers, but also about informal. So yeah, when I started meetings with you, I remember we had a nice conversation about time required to express some of my ideas, and I, I remember I told you that probably that was faster. That was faster for me to say, let's go back on track, or let's call it a day. Any any idiom or collocation, colloquial phrase, not collocation, colloquial phrase. Yeah, that I spent less time. Um, that is why that was good. Yeah, and at that time you explained it to me. Probably I needed to spend more time explaining what I meant.
Yeah.
But yeah, so probably that was easier to use a normal conversation. So in that
Yes,
case,
yes.
okay, you
Yes, I
were
agree with
saying.
you 100%. You know, very often we use shorter phrases or
Mm-hmm,
shorter sentences with more complexity because it is shorter. But the problem with that is when sentences are shorter, it often includes more nuance that
mm-hmm,
depends on context. But the problem with that is you increase the probability of misunderstanding.
mm-hmm,
So my goal in language is not um, you know, I'm not against the idea of complexity and look for absolute simplicity. If we want absolute simplicity, we need nothingness, we need death, kind of, which is not the goal here. The goal is to reduce unnecessary complexity. That is the problem, right? So the question should always be, and what I encourage clients to ask themselves is, they will use a specific sentence. Right, everyone, it all boils down to this. And then I look at them and say, you use the phrase "it boils down to." Is that the clearest way to express this idea? They look and they say, well, maybe not. And I say, okay, well, why do you use it then? Well, understand, it is tradition. It is a traditional, blind tradition of habit. Many first language speakers, I even asked the same question to a first language speaker recently. They used the phrase "boil down." And I said, just out of curiosity, if I ask you to rephrase that in a way that is just directly accurate to what you want to say, what phrase can you use? And they did not know. They had to think about it, because we are so used to these habits, these phrases that have fixed meaning, and they can use that and they can use it in the correct context, but it does not mean that it is the clearest option. Instead of something like "to summarize" or "the most important point is this." Those options are a lot clearer than "to boil down," because boil down has many. It can mean to physically boil water so that it goes from liquid to gas. Not very clear language. And yes, if I use complexity that shortens my sentence, as you correctly noted, a person can then be confused, and then you have to explain yourself what you actually mean. They have more questions for you, just to confirm, or they might even make a mistake in the office, and you say, "I did not say this," and they say, "Oopsie, I misinterpreted or misunderstood you." When one speaks as clearly as is possible, that is the goal, not just to be simple, to be as simple as is possible. It is a spectrum. Does that make sense? It is all about that spectrum.
It's a very fine line here.
Yeah. Ask yourself, can it be made simpler? So if you use these idiomatic expressions, we can, I like to do this once in a blue moon. Why not just say, I do this occasionally, or I do this sometimes, I do this rarely, because those words, as I say, are more directly connected to what you actually want to express. They're more connected to the reality of what you want to say, rather than some abstract, non-related, who cares about the moon,
The next part of this podcast is coming soon. Subscribe so you don't miss anything.